Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into something, well, pretty surprising happening in the European automotive market right now. You'd think, with electric vehicles booming, companies focused purely on EVs would be absolutely crushing it.
You would, yeah.
But the data you've shared tells a different story for one of the biggest names out there, Tesla. Their sales figures took a significant hit in Europe during the first half of 2025.
Yeah.
The big question is, how can that possibly happen when the overall market for EVs is, growing?
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance. You see reports of rising EV adoption across the continent, and then you look at Tesla's numbers, and there's this sharp divergence.
Right.
This deep dive is specifically designed to help you understand the layers behind that.
Exactly. We've got this stack of reports, articles, and data you've provided, covering everything from global delivery numbers to country-specific sales drops and competitive analysis.
Yeah, quite a bit to get through.
We're going to navigate all of this together, acting as your guides to extract the most important, knowledge nuggets.
Our mission is really to help you get truly well-informed on this intriguing situation, looking at the scale of the downturn, the shifting competitive landscape Tesla's facing, some internal factors unique to the company, and the broader external market forces at play.
Yeah.
This deep dive is tailored just for you.
So let's jump right in and look at the magnitude of this decline, because the numbers, both globally and especially in Europe, are pretty eye-opening.
They really are. Starting with the global picture, Tesla's Q1 2025 deliveries were down significantly, about 13% year over year compared to Q1 2024.
13%, okay.
And if you look at the quarter-over-quarter drop from Q4 2024, it's even more pronounced, a 32% decline.
32?
Yeah. That actually marked their lowest quarterly sales volume since way back in 2022.
Wow, back to 2022 levels. And that translates directly to the financials, right?
Absolutely. The financial impact was substantial in Q1 2025. Automotive revenue dropped by 20%, and their net income plunged a dramatic 71% compared to the same quarter the previous year.
71% drop in net income. So the global picture is tough, but you mentioned Europe was particularly acute.
Yes, the decline was much sharper in Europe. Look at January 2025 registrations. They plummeted 45% year over year.
45%.
And by April 2025, sales across 32 European countries were down approximately 49% compared to April of the previous year, almost cut in half.
Nearly halved in just 1 month. That's stunning.
It really is. And for the first 4 months of 2025 combined, European sales were down about 39% overall compared to the same period in 2024.
Okay.
What's particularly telling is it wasn't just lower volume models affected. The Model Y, which, was the global bestseller in 2023, and Tesla's flagship.
Yeah, their main car.
Even fell significantly in European rankings. By April 2025, some reports in the sources indicated it was reportedly ranking as low as 9th among electric cars in certain markets, trailing even newer models like Skoda's Elrock.
Ranking 9th.
Yeah.
For the Model Y. That really underscores how broad this challenge is, impacting their absolute core product.
It really does. It suggests something fundamental is shifting.
So does this picture look the same everywhere across Europe? Or are there big differences by country?
That's a great question, because the sources really highlight the variation, but the overall trend in major markets is undeniably negative. Germany, for instance, saw some dramatic drops.
Okay.
Nearly 60% year over year in January, a staggering 76% in February.
76%.
And still down over 45% in April 2025.
And the source materials make a very direct link there, don't they? To the abrupt end of the national purchase subsidies at the end of 2023.
Exactly. That German situation is almost a textbook example of a cliff edge effect from subsidy removal. In France, steep declines were also evident. Down 63% in January, 26% in February, and nearly 60% in April 2025.
Wow.
This decline happened despite a recovery in the broader French BEV market that month.
So France also saw subsidy changes play a role. I think I remember seeing that.
Yes, tied to changes in their main purchase incentive, the bonus écologique from December 2024, which reduced aid and tied it more strictly to income.
Okay. What about the UK? I saw some mixed numbers there.
You're right. The UK saw a 7.8% drop in January year over year, but then saw a positive 20.7% increase in February 2025.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, the Model 3 and Y were the second and third most popular models that month.
Oh.
That suggests some specific market conditions or perhaps, timing of deliveries created a pocket of resilience in February. But looking across the first 4 months, the overall UK trend wasn't one of strong growth for Tesla.
Right, just a blip maybe. And elsewhere, the droughts were even more severe.
Much more. Sweden saw its sales plummet over 80% in April 2025.
80%.
Reaching its lowest point since late 2022, which is remarkable considering Sweden generally has a very high EV market share.
Yeah, you'd expect them to do well there.
And Denmark saw a 67% year-over-year decline in April.
But Norway seemed different in Q1. That was the exception.
Yes, Norway was the outlier in Q1 2025. The Model Y was the best-selling car overall, and the refreshed Model 3, the Highland version, was second.
Okay.
The sources point out Norway is a very mature EV market with high existing penetration and quite stable, long-standing incentives, which may have buffered Tesla from the sharp declines seen elsewhere.
Okay, so that's the picture of Tesla's decline. But here's where it gets really interesting and points to company-specific issues. All of this is happening while the overall European EV market is growing.
This is the crucial point of divergence. It tells you this isn't about Europeans suddenly losing interest in electric cars.
Right.
While overall new car registrations in the EU saw a slight decline in early 2025, the battery electric vehicle, or BEV segment, actually grew quite strongly.
How much are we talking? What were the numbers?
The EU BEV sales grew over 26% year-to-date through April 2025.
22% growth.
Yeah. This boosted their market share significantly, reaching 15.3% of new registrations, up from 12% in the same period the previous year.
Okay.
In Q1 2025 alone, EU BEV sales increased by almost 24%. April 2025 specifically saw EU BEV sales surge over 34% in the EU, or 28% for broader Europe.
Wow. So the pie is getting bigger, but Tesla's slice is shrinking dramatically.
Yeah.
That means competitors are capturing that growth.
Exactly. It highlights a significant powertrain shift happening. Fewer people might be buying cars overall, but a larger proportion of those are choosing electric.
Makes sense.
Tesla, as a pure BEV maker, should be perfectly positioned to benefit from this, but instead they're losing ground.
Yeah.
This divergence strongly signals that there are challenges related to Tesla's product, pricing, competitive positioning, or, brand appeal that are making buyers choose alternatives within that growing EV market.
Which takes us perfectly into the shifting competitive arena in Europe's EV market. It sounds like it's getting crowded fast.
It is, and a major factor is the rapid ascent of new challengers, particularly Chinese brands like BYD and SAIC, which owns MG.
Yes, BYD and MG.
They're making significant inroads.
They seem to be focused on affordability and offering a wider range of models, right?
Yeah.
That seems to be their angle.
Precisely. SAI MG European sales were up a substantial 54% in April 2025.
54%.
And reports in the sources suggest BYD may have actually outsold Tesla in Europe for the first time in April 2025.
Really?
With some reports citing year-over-year surges for BYD anywhere from 169% to an astonishing 359% for that single month.
That kind of growth is just incredible. It's huge.
It really highlights the speed of their expansion. Collectively, Chinese brands captured nearly 8% of the European market, counting both EVs and hybrids, by April 2025, with their sales growing almost 60% year-over-year.
Wow. That kind of success strongly suggests price is a key factor, especially in a market facing inflation and, as we said, reduced subsidies. Tesla's traditionally premium pricing seems vulnerable against these competitors who are explicitly focused on cut-price options like MG or general affordability like BYD.
And you mentioned model diversity, that's another point. While Tesla has the Model 3 and Y, competitors are offering a much wider range.
Yeah.
From smaller compact cars to family vehicles, often at those lower price points, potentially meeting more diverse European needs than Tesla's current core offering.
It's not just the new players either. Legacy automakers are also making a massive push into EVs, finally.
They absolutely are. Established European players like the VW Group, BMW, Renault, Mercedes-Benz, and others have significantly ramped up their offerings, introducing what the sources call an ever-growing selection of electric vehicles.
Right.
This is where Tesla's early mover advantage starts to really diminish.
Because consumers have more options from brands they already know, trust, and maybe have service relationships with. That familiarity factor.
Exactly. The familiarity provides a comfort factor for mainstream buyers. In April 2025, reports indicated Tesla was reportedly overtaken by 10 different rival groups.
10.
including big names like VW, BMW, and Renault. VW Group remains the top overall automotive brand in Europe.
Still dominant overall.
And if you look at the BEV share within these established brands' own sales pools in April 2025, VW was at 19%, BMW 24%, Mercedes, Volvo, Polestar combined 22%, and Kia 21%.
Those are significant proportions of their total sales already being electric.
Yeah,
That's pretty quick adoption within their own ranges.
it is.
And you mentioned local loyalty before, like the Volvo XC40 being popular in Sweden.
Yes, that plays a role too. Beyond brand trust, these legacy makers often have much denser dealer and service networks across Europe.
That's a big practical advantage.
It is. As EVs become more mainstream, expectations for convenient service and repairs rise. Tesla's direct sales model and service center approach, while innovative, might be perceived as less convenient or accessible compared to those traditional widespread networks.
So all this pressure from new entrants and established players is clearly visible in Tesla's rapidly eroding market share in Europe.
The numbers here are really stark and tell the story clearly. Tesla's share of the European BEV market, which includes the EU, EFTA, and the UK, dropped from over 18% in 2023 to under 17% in 2024, and then sharply to just 9.4% in Q1 2025.
Wow, nearly halved from 2023 to Q1 25. And April 2025 was even more acute.
One report cited in the sources suggested their BEV share in the EU, EFTA, and UK nearly halved year over year in April to just 0.7%.
0.7% share.
In that specific month's BEV registrations, yes, according to one source. Another indicated their overall EU market share nearly halved year to date, dropping to 1.1%.
Again, happening while the total EU BEV market share was increasing. That juxtaposition is really powerful. It just screams company-specific issues.
It is. This rapid erosion suggests that brand loyalty for Tesla might not be as strong as some might have assumed, especially when facing negative factors, pricing challenges, product freshness issues, certain controversies, and encountering such a sheer number of increasingly appealing alternatives.
Right.
The image of being the unique progressive EV choice is diminishing as competition heats up. A growing number of customers are clearly switching allegiance.
Which circles us back to pricing pressures and affordability. Given the subsidy changes and the rise of affordable competitors, price is clearly pivotal for mass adoption now.
It absolutely is. Chinese brands are openly emphasizing cut price and affordability.
Yeah.
In contrast, when the refreshed Model Y Juniper AWD version launched in Germany, its price point was $60,994, which one source notes was a significant price increase versus 2024.
Yeah.
The UK also had tiered pricing with the initial launch series over £60,000, although a lower-priced rear-wheel drive version came later around £44,990.
That initial high price point for the updated Model Y doesn't sound like a response to an affordability crisis or an attempt to aggressively compete on price. More like the opposite.
It doesn't, and that's a major challenge when subsidies are being reduced or removed and you're facing much cheaper rivals.
Right.
The argument for Tesla's total cost of ownership, while still potentially strong in some areas, is weaker if competitors offer a lower initial purchase price and potentially lower service costs. As suggested by comparisons found in the sources regarding BYD Seal versus Model 3 service pricing, subsidy reductions make that upfront price gap much harder for Tesla to bridge.
So we've got intense external competition and market dynamics pushing down on Tesla. But are there also some internal challenges and factors specific to Tesla that contributed to this, things they maybe could control more?
Yes, absolutely. One significant area is product lifecycle and the timing of updates. The core Model 3 and Y lineup, despite their success, were increasingly seen as aging in a market that moves fast on tech and design updates.
Yeah, they felt a bit long in the tooth, maybe. They did introduce refreshed models, though, the Model 3 Highland and the Model Y Juniper.
Right. The Model 3 Highland had been rolling out, and the sources mention its impact positively in markets like Norway in Q1 2025. The Model Y Juniper started consistent production at the Gigafactory Berlin in February 2025.
Okay.
With European deliveries expected from around March to May, or potentially even June in some cases, so fairly recently in the period we're looking at.
What kind of updates did the Juniper version bring? Were they significant?
The sources list several updates for the Model Y Juniper, including new lights, upgraded suspension, acoustic glass aimed at reducing cabin noise, a front 180-degree camera, ventilated front seats,
Oh, nice.
a rear screen for passengers, blind spot monitors, new wheels, and quieter tires. The Model 3 Highland also got exterior and interior updates aimed at better aero and a quieter cabin. So Real improvements.
Okay, so they refreshed the models, which is good, but the timing sounds like it might have been a problem, like maybe too late.
That's a key part of the analysis in the sources. Selling the older, pre-refresh models while competitors were launching newer, often cheaper, alternatives created a vulnerability.
Yeah.
The refreshes, particularly for the high-volume Model Y in Europe, seem to have arrived after some significant market share had already been lost in the early months of 2025.
Right.
And if initial Juniper availability or deliveries were limited or delayed into the second quarter, buyers facing limited options from Tesla might have simply chosen readily available alternatives from competitors.
So production hurdles might have also played a role then, getting the new models out the door.
Absolutely. The Gigafactory Berlin is critical for European supply, especially the Model Y.
Right.
The sources mention that the transition to producing the updated Juniper version required a planned slowdown or pause for retooling. The plant manager confirmed this transition takes time, and that inherently created a temporary supply vacuum in early 2025, exactly when they needed cars to sell against surging competitors.
And if their inventory was lean, like the 3,200 vehicles mentioned at Giga Berlin at one point, that would hurt, wouldn't it?
That situation amplifies the impact of any slowdown. A lean inventory during a production transition means you have fewer cars on the ground to sell right when demand might be there, or when competitors are flooding the market with their own new models.
Yeah, bad timing.
The sources also mention reports of more general production interruptions affecting 2025 sales and supply, although the plant manager attributed slowdowns primarily to the modernization and transition efforts, denying unscheduled halts in March 2025.
The goal is to get back to higher production volumes though, right? Aiming for 1,000 cars a day.
Yes. The plant is working towards higher output and did produce its 500,000th Model Y in March 2025, so the capability is there.
Right.
But analysts did lower their Q1 delivery expectations partly due to this modernization effort. Achieving stable, high-volume production is absolutely critical for consistently meeting demand in Europe.
Let's revisit the pricing and go-to-market strategy specifically for Europe. We talked about the Model Y Juniper launch price feeling high.
Yes, the $60,990 launch price for the AWD in Germany was seen as a significant price increase versus 2024 by one source.
Yeah, not exactly fighting inflation there.
In the UK, the initial high price point of the launch series was also noted, even with a lower-priced RWD version coming later. This initial high price point for the refreshed Model Y really risks alienating price-sensitive buyers in the current economic and subsidy climate, especially given the rise of significantly cheaper rivals.
And their direct sales model. Does that play into it as the market broadens?
The direct sales model has inherent efficiencies, but as the market matures and attracts a broader, more mainstream buyer base, bypassing traditional dealerships can present challenges.
How so?
While mainstream buyers are often accustomed to the personalized assistance, the ease of test drives, trade-ins, and financing options offered by traditional dealer networks.
Right, the handhold.
Yeah. Tesla's direct model, while great for some early adopters, might feel less accessible or supportive to these newer buyers entering the EV market.
And it seems they're sensitive to import costs, too, given the mention of their lawsuit against EU tariffs on China-built EVs.
Yes, that lawsuit highlights the financial pressures and cost sensitivities at play, and how different tariff rates, 7.8% for China-built Teslas versus potentially much higher tariffs for some other brands mentioned in policy discussions, can influence strategy and pricing.
Okay. Another area that's increasingly important for mainstream buyers is vehicle quality, reliability, and the service experience, especially in Europe with its, high expectations.
This presents a bit of a mixed picture based on the sources.
Okay.
On one hand, a J.D. Power 2025 U.S. study showed Tesla improving its reliability metrics, measured in problems per 100 vehicles, or PP100. Their score of 209 PP100 was actually better than some traditional luxury brands in the U.S. context, although they weren't officially ranked in the overall study due to some data access limits.
Okay, that sounds like a positive signal from owners in the U.S., but the European data seems less favorable from those inspection reports.
It does. Data from mandatory European vehicle inspections tells a different story. The German 2V report, which is based on these official inspections, showed the 3-year-old Model 3 with a high fault rate.
High fault rate.
Yeah, placing it at the bottom of reliability rankings compared to other models its age. The issues flagged included things like lighting, brakes, and axles.
Oh, not minor things then.
No. Similarly, data from Danish authorities showed 23% of 2020 Model 3s failing their first mandatory inspection, compared to just 9% for other EVs.
23% failure rate.
With problems cited in in brakes, steering, lights, tires, and axles. Again, core components.
And some sources link this to Tesla's approach, maybe the lack of defined mandatory service intervals, like things aren't getting checked regularly.
That's suggested as a potential factor. It could mean that certain issues that might be caught proactively during a traditional scheduled service might go unnoticed or unaddressed longer in Tesla's model, leading to problems showing up during mandatory inspections.
But then we see owner satisfaction surveys that are very positive, like that UK one naming them best brand. How does that square?
Exactly. It's a bit of a paradox. For example, that honestjohn.co.uk survey named Tesla the best UK brand for 2025 based on owner feedback.
So owners love them, but the inspectors find faults.
It suggests that enthusiasts and existing owners who value the brand and technology might be more tolerant of or less concerned by certain issues. However, the official inspection reports like TÜV carry significant weight with mainstream buyers who prioritize long-term reliability and worry about passing mandatory technical checks. They influence general perception beyond the enthusiast base.
Right, those reports get headlines. And service convenience itself could be a factor, the whole mobile tech versus dealer network thing.
Definitely. Reliance on mobile technicians and service centers versus the extensive network of traditional dealerships is seen by some as potential weakness in Europe. As the Tesla fleet grows, wait times for service or repairs could lengthen.
Yeah.
And European consumers, used to widespread traditional networks, may find Tesla's approach less convenient, especially for complex physical repairs compared to routine maintenance.
So it's a complex picture of competitive pressure combined with these internal factors. Now let's look at the broader external headwinds and market dynamics affecting everyone, but perhaps hitting Tesla hard.
A major one, as we touched on earlier with Germany and France, is the evolving landscape of EV subsidies across Europe.
Right, the government support changing.
Governments use these incentives to kickstart adoption, but many are now being scaled back or altered, directly increasing the out-of-pocket cost for buyers and making price sensitivity paramount.
The abrupt discontinuation of Germany's Umwelt bonus was a prime example. That really hit them.
It was. That cliff edge moment at the end of 2023 is widely cited as a key factor in the dramatic sales drop there. While some tax benefits remain, they don't provide the same direct reduction in the purchase price that the bonus did.
And in France, the changes reduced the maximum aid and tied it more to income.
Right. That effective budget cut and redirection of aid from December 2024 could steer demand towards more budget-friendly EVs, potentially disadvantaging premium-priced brands like Tesla.
The UK is changing things too, even on the tax side. The VED change.
Yes, direct purchase subsidies were phased out earlier, but from April 1st, 2025, a significant change impacts total cost of ownership. The vehicle excise duty, or road tax, exemption for EVs ended.
Okay.
EVs now pay standard rates, and those with a list price over £40,000 also pay an expensive car supplement for 5 years.
That directly erodes one of the financial benefits of owning a premium EV like a Tesla, making it more expensive over the first few years compared to previously. It hits those pricier models hard.
Exactly. It disproportionately affects premium brands. Norway has maintained a VAT exemption below a certain price threshold, but other changes like a higher insurance fee for EVs introduced in 2025 present a somewhat mixed picture. Sweden also lacks a direct purchase bonus, relying more on tax benefits and scrappage premiums.
So the clear overall trend is less direct financial support for buyers, making price competitiveness much more critical everywhere. It really heightens the pressure from those cheaper brands.
Absolutely. And then there's a factor widely discussed in the source material, the MUSK factor.
Ah, yes. This is cited as potentially influencing brand perception and sales in Europe. How significantly?
Yes, analysis in the sources suggests Elon Musk's public persona, his sometimes controversial statements, perceived political leanings, and involvement in political matters are linked to negative reactions from some European consumers.
Okay.
This includes mentions of backlash, protests, and boycotts, which can potentially tarnish the brand image.
Why is this seen as particularly impactful in Europe? More so than maybe elsewhere?
The analysis is that European consumers are often seen as highly influenced by corporate values and perceived ethics.
Right, ESG focus and all that.
Yeah. Tesla, which once held a strong image as a progressive, sustainable innovator, is now, for some buyers, tied to the CEO's more divisive public image. This can create a conflict for buyers who hold different values or simply want to avoid controversy, potentially alienating them towards competitor EV brands perceived as more neutral or aligned with their own values. A February 2025 poll, mentioned the sources, even showed retail traders saw Musk's politics as a drag on the stock price.
So if the CEO's actions are seen as contradicting the brand's historical image or a buyer's personal values, they might look elsewhere for an EV. Especially now, there are credible alternatives.
That's the argument presented in the sources. It suggests the impact may linger and influence purchasing decisions, even if his focus publicly shifts.
We also have broader macroeconomic pressures affecting the market as a whole, right? The economy is not exactly booming.
Yes. The European market is operating within a challenging global economy, with ongoing inflation and concerns about purchasing power.
Yeah.
The slight overall decline in new car registrations across the EU suggests these headwinds are impacting consumer confidence and big-ticket purchases.
And the higher upfront cost of a premium EV like a Tesla becomes an even bigger barrier in an inflationary environment. People just have less money or are more cautious.
It does. Consumers may delay purchases, potentially opt for cheaper alternatives, whether that's less expensive EVs or even returning to ICE or hybrid options, or simply keep their old cars longer.
Right.
This economic climate amplifies the importance of price and value for money. The sources also mention that trade policies, including past U.S. administration trade war rhetoric, potentially added to anti-American sentiment among some Europeans.
That'll be an interesting point.
Which could subtly influence preference for European or Asian brands over U.S. ones like Tesla. Tesla's lawsuit against EU tariffs highlights the complexity here.
Finally, there's a shift in consumer preferences we need to consider that benefits competitors, but not Tesla directly. The rise of hybrids.
This is a big one. While the BEV market is growing, hybrid electric vehicles, both traditional HEVs and plug-in PHEVs, have surged even more dramatically.
More than BEVs?
Yeah, HEVs captured over 35% of the EU market share year-to-date April 2025, a significant 20% increase year-over-year, making them the single most preferred powertrain choice. PHEVs also grew.
So many consumers are taking a step towards electrification, but not necessarily ready for full BEV. They want that safety net.
That's exactly the interpretation. Hesitation due to perceived range anxiety, concerns about charging infrastructure availability and speed, or the higher upfront cost of BEVs compared to hybrids pushes many buyers towards hybrids as a more comfortable stepping stone.
Makes sense.
They offer some electric-only driving or efficiency benefits without the perceived anxieties of being purely battery-dependent on longer trips or in areas with less developed charging networks.
And Tesla, being a pure BEV maker, doesn't participate in this booming hybrid segment at all. They're missing out on that whole chunk of the market.
It's a significant missed opportunity in a large and growing part of the market that is embracing electrification, just not necessarily pure electrification yet.
Right.
The sources mention surveys showing that while EV purchase intent is increasing, preferences for PHEV versus BEV vary significantly by country, with some showing much stronger preference for plug-in hybrids. This points to persistent concerns that lead cautious buyers to hybrids as a more practical electrified option, which indirectly tempers growth for all pure BEV brands, including Tesla, by siphoning off potential buyers.
Okay, that was a really comprehensive look at a complex situation. It's clear this sales decline isn't due to one single thing. It's like a perfect storm.
Absolutely. It's a confluence of interacting factors.
Yep.
Intense competition from rapidly expanding Chinese brands and newly serious legacy automakers.
Yep.
A shrinking market share despite overall EV market growth. The impact of reduced government subsidies making price sensitivity much higher.
Big one.
Internal issues like the timing of model refreshes and production transitions, creating supply gaps, potential perceptions around quality and service reliability.
Yeah, the two reports.
The influence of the Musk factor on brand image for some buyers, broader macroeconomic pressures dampening overall car demand, and the rise of hybrids capturing buyers who aren't ready for full BEV yet.
And as you said, these factors don't exist in isolation. They all pile on each other. Subsidy cuts amplify price sensitivity against cheaper competitors.
Yeah.
A potentially tarnished brand image makes it harder to justify a premium price point. Production delays mean they can't capitalize even when demand exists.
Precisely. Navigating this environment successfully requires a multifaceted strategy from Tesla, and the sources hint at some potential pathways they need to explore.
What are some of those key pathways identified? What should they be doing?
Well, on the product side, ensuring stable and sufficient supply of the refreshed Model Y Juniper and Model 3 Highland is critical now that the updates are available.
Get the new cars out there.
Yeah. There's also the strong suggestion that considering genuinely more affordable models, perhaps tailored specifically for the European market, is necessary to compete with the lower-priced Chinese EVs gaining traction.
A cheaper Tesla.
Seems necessary. And critically, addressing quality and reliability concerns highlighted by European inspectorates is crucial for building long-term trust with a broader, more mainstream customer base.
Okay. And in the market itself, how they sell.
Competitive pricing isn't optional anymore, it's vital. They need to find ways to offer compelling value, perhaps through different trim levels or pricing structures, and better communicate the value proposition of their vehicles to justify the cost against cheaper alternatives.
Yeah, explain why it's worth more.
And enhancing the accessibility and convenience of their service network in Europe is also essential to meet the expectations of mainstream buyers used to traditional dealer networks.
What about the brand and operation side? Beyond the product.
Addressing the potential negative impact of the CEO's public persona on the brand image in Europe is important.
Tricky one.
Yeah. This might involve reframing the brand narrative to focus more clearly on innovation and sustainability, aspects that still resonate strongly with European values, rather than letting it be dominated by the CEO's controversies.
Back to basics, maybe.
And operationally, ensuring stable, high-volume production at Gigafactory Berlin without frequent interruptions is fundamental to meeting potential demand. Just build the cars consistently.
And long-term, looking further ahead.
The core challenge is adapting to a more pragmatic, value-conscious mainstream buyer base entering the EV market. While Tesla is purely BEV, understanding why hybrids are so popular in Europe, the range, charging, and cost concerns can help them better position BEVs and advocate for the charging infrastructure needed to alleviate those worries.
Right, tackle the reasons people choose hybrids.
Tesla's challenges in Europe really highlight that their historical dominance as the EV player isn't a guarantee forever. It demands adapting to a market that's rapidly maturing and becoming intensely competitive on multiple fronts.
It certainly does. This deep dive has taken us through the scale of the decline, the intensifying competition, the internal challenges, and the external headwinds affecting Tesla's sales in Europe. A lot to digest.
We've covered a lot, from plummeting sales figures and shrinking market share against a growing market, to the dramatic impact of subsidy changes, the pressure from new and legacy competitors, the role of model refreshes and production issues, and even how brand perception influenced by external factors can play a role.
So as you reflect on everything we've discussed from these sources, what stands out to you the most in this deep dive? What questions do these interconnected factors raise for you about the future of the EV market in Europe and where Tesla fits into that evolving picture?
And perhaps the final provocative thought to consider is this. Could Tesla's success in Europe from this point forward depend less on being seen as the unique, innovative, disruptive EV leader it once was, and more on its ability to effectively compete head-to-head on fundamentals like price, quality, and appealing to the mainstream expectations of a crowded, value-conscious market? Basically becoming more like a normal car company in some ways.
A lot to think about for sure. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.